It's the same version. I think it's the same. It's a new law.
Do you want me to start all over then, Don? I can
Keep it short. I'll try to.
Do a little can.
Okay. And so that was us.
Yep, that was the YouTube.
That's good.
echoing.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. If you were here earlier, we're having a little technical difficulty, and that's always fun. We are online now. Hopefully everything's okay. And if not, if somebody wouldn't mind on the chat letting us know if you're not seeing the PowerPoint or whatever we're talking about. So anyway, we're going to start all over here. This is Spoken History, and we are going to have a speaker here, Don Schnitzler, talk to us about a review of the 150th anniversary here in Marshfield. And he's also going to touch upon the 250th anniversary for America on July 4th for 2026. So we've got a lot of information to cover. So I'm going to turn it over to him. Stay with us, everybody. So far, everything's still working. There you go, Don.
Okay. I hope this is working. There we go. Now you can see me. I'm going to move that out of the way here. Basically, what I want to do is kind of recap the things that went on during the past year for Marshfield's 150th anniversary. And I don't think it's going to be all inclusive. I'm going to hit the highlights, and I'll give people a chance to ask questions at the end. Okay. We're cursed today. That's all I can say. It's not moving. Oh, there. Okay. All at once it went. Basically, what I want to do is kind of give you a history of Marshfield, a quick down and dirty history. Talk about some of the ideas we kicked around for the events to be held this year, what plans worked, what plans didn't work. And then when we come to the 250th anniversary of the city, no, not of the city, of the country in 2026, an invitation for everybody to get involved with planning those activities. So when we first started planning the 150th anniversary for the city of Marshfield, we came up with a possible calendar. You can see it off here on the right. There were different ideas about different events that would be held throughout the year, something every month, to fill out the year and celebrate Marshfield's anniversary. For the most part, the big events happened as they were supposed to happen. Some of the littler events, for lack of people to help or lack of finances or different reasons, they didn't happen. And that's okay. We did what we could do. And I remember Chris Myers saying something once about people should look at what's available or what the options are, and then pick one or two things and do the best job possible on those things rather than try to tackle too much. And I think in the scheme of things, that's what we did here this year. There were things that we didn't have the people to make it successful, so we backed away from some of those. Anyway, we'll talk about some of those things that did work as we go through here. As far as the brief history goes, we're going to keep this rather short. We know that Marshfield is here today because the Wisconsin Central Railroad came through this area in 1871 and 1872. November of 1871, the railroad reached Stevens Point, and in the spring of 1872, they started building west from Stevens Point and north to Ashland. And if you look at this map on the right, you can see a yellow highlighted path of the train right in here. That was the line of the Wisconsin Central Railroad. And so each of the towns or communities that we recognize today were given mile marker names because they represented how many miles it was from Stevens Point. So Junction City was section 11 because it was 11 miles. Auburndale was section 23. Sometimes you see it as section 25 because it was 23 or 25 miles from Auburndale. And then Marshfield became known as section 32 because it was 32 miles by railroad to Stevens Point. And then the others go on. When it comes to Marshfield, the first settler everyone agrees on, was a French Canadian who had owned a hotel in Necedah, who, anticipating the railroad coming through here in 1872, came to Marshfield and built a log hotel basically on land that was either purchased or given to him by the railroad. And I really think it was purchased rather than given to him, because there's a land transaction registered at the Register of Deeds office in Wisconsin Rapids. The family traditionally is reported as having arrived here April 1st, 1872. And then the family that came with him was his wife. His wife was Mina, their daughter Della, his brother Frank, and then they brought the handyman, the guy who worked for him at the store or at the hotel in Necedah, Gabriel Dolph Lupiant, and he came with them. Of the original family and people that came to Marshfield in 1872, Gabriel or Dolph Lupiant is the one who still has family members here in town. The family came back to Marshfield after they left the homestead land in Clark County, and then they left again and came back. But eventually Dolph Lupiant ended up settling in Marshfield and staying in Marshfield. Now, when it comes to Wisconsin Central, I mentioned this before, and I won't spend too much time on it again. They started in Menasha in 1871, and they reached Stevens Point in the November of 1871. And then in March of 1872, when the ground thawed and the snow was gone, they started construction from Stevens Point to this heading towards Marshfield. Tradition has it that they arrived in Marshfield on July 4th. However, they didn't really get to Auburndale until the end of July, so they actually probably arrived in Marshfield sometime in August. This is a bird's eye view of the city. It was created in 1883. A local artist, an artist came through and sketched all the buildings and then platted it out or laid them out on the street plan for the city of Marshfield. And so here's a close-up of it. You can see the downtown business district running through the central, kind of goes through on a diagonal. There's a horse and cart heading south on Central Avenue. And then you can see the main business district. Marshfield was actually a pretty prosperous town by the time it had been here 11 years. It was a good-sized community. There are some key dates to remember about Marshfield's early history, and those are things that we tried to incorporate into the 150th anniversary this year. The legend or the accepted date of arrival of the first white settlers here in April 1st of 1872, the arrival of the Wisconsin Central Railroad in July of 1872. One that wasn't mentioned when I did this talk a year ago about what we were planning to do for the anniversary was the arrival of William Upham. And, you know, when I'm thinking back, that was an oversight, because William Upham is really the reason Marshfield is still here. And in many ways, the reason why Marshfield became the prosperous city that it was. He inspired people to build, he inspired other people to come in here and establish businesses, and attracted people to settle in this area. Before that, there wasn't that nucleus of people wanting to come to Marshfield and stay and really create a community. It was Mr. Upham and his wife, Mary, that inspired that kind of activity here in the town. Everyone knows that in the history of Marshfield, one of the biggest events that ever happened on June 27th, 1887, and that was the Great Marshfield Fire. It was a fire that basically potentially could have wiped out the entire town. at the end of the day, at the end of the fire, fire started about 11 o'clock, 11:49. And then it was out by 6 or 7 o'clock that night. But during the time that it burnt, 250 buildings were destroyed. The entire downtown was wiped out, but one store. Marshfield could have gone away that day because at that time, most of the easy timber around the area had already been harvested. And it would have been just as easy for the major employer, who was Mr. Upham, to say, I think I'm going to pack up and move someplace else to set up my business. But Mr. Upham didn't. Mr. Upham had a loyalty to the people in Marshfield. And when they came and asked him about what his plans were, the story goes that he said, we've had a catastrophe today. I'm going to think about it overnight. But if I raise my flag tomorrow morning, that means I'm rebuilding. And at 6 o'clock the next morning, he ordered his flag raised across the yard. Across his front yard, there was a large flagpole. And he ordered that flag raised, signifying that he would rebuild. And because he was willing to invest or reinvest in the community, most of the other people in town also did the same thing and stayed put. We celebrate the anniversary of the fire multiple times. The first big celebration occurred in 1937 with an event called the Homecoming Parade. And it was actually the first time they celebrated, and celebrating is the wrong word, commemorated the fire and the will of the people that stayed here and made Marshfield what it was. Then in 1987, they celebrated the 100th anniversary. In 2012, the 125th anniversary. It's a recurring theme that Marshfield remembers that day, because it is a day that we could have ceased to exist. And I think in some ways, if we had had another major employer other than William Upham, it probably would have been Marshfield's final days. Manville, which is a town just north of Marshfield, 6 miles north at one time, had a major fire in the 1890s. And most of us don't know where Manville is anymore because Mr. Sherry, when the town burnt, packed up and moved everything out, and the town just ceased to exist. Today, there's just a stop and go lights on Man Road, north of town a little ways. And then we also have celebrated anniversaries for the city's founding. And again, we've done that in 1972 and 1997. So keeping with that, 1872 is the official date of the city's founding. We're celebrating the 150th in 2022. Now, I'm going to get to some of the things that we talked about as far as ideas. And one of the first ideas that was kicked around was taking some of the photographs that we have at the Northwood County Historical Society, or have people from town share them, and create a Now and Then series. And it didn't happen exactly the way we were thinking it was going to, but we had started with Then and Now column, and it appeared weekly in the Hub City Times. And when it first started out, it was intended to be just kind of a short synopsis of when the building was built, who the builder was, or the owner at the time. Because Marshfield changed their street addresses at different time, the alternate addresses that existed for that building, and then kind of a timeline of who the business occupants were in that building. And so down in the lower right-hand corner here, you see the old consumer building, what's now St. Vincent de Paul. And so we go through and we talk a little bit about that it was built for Michael Steinmetz first. After the Steinmetz family sold it, they sold it to the Kessel brothers, then Kessel brothers sold it, and then it got sold. It became a consumer store, then it became Johnson Hills, and then it became Macaulay's for a while, and then it became St. Vincent de Paul. So we kind of got all of that onto that little story, but it was all bullet points, and there really wasn't much to a story. So after a short time, we kind of changed the way the then and now columns were going so that there was more information about it. It continued to appear in the Hub City Times, but it morphed. And so instead of just including those key elements, we started to put more of a narrative together and left the timeline out of it. So in this case, this is the Boucher, what we know as Boucher's Radio Repair Shop on West 3rd Street. It was built for a dentist, Dr. Harrington. It was built by the Crazen brothers, and it was built in 1919. So we went back to the same kind of information, but then we provided a little bit more of a narrative format to it, so it became more interesting. And based on feedback that I was getting from people who were reading the columns in the Hub City Times, this is something they preferred to just those bullet points. And so while we're doing it this way, first thing we find is that when you start talking about a building that has had lots of owners or lots of occupants, that list of information that goes in there gets longer. And so generally the word limit, the Hub City Times have been very flexible about what's been submitted, but we've tried to keep it under 300 words. And it's a roundabout figure. So some of them have gotten longer and ended up being on more than one page in the newspaper. But it was an expansion of the original idea, or a switch from the original idea of how we were going to do it. And I think that's one of the things we did as the year went on. We switched some things up because we found it wasn't going to work that way, and it was more efficient to do it this way. Now, when we first started the then and now column, I'm going to go back here, each then and now column had a little paragraph in there. To learn more about this building, refer to the Marshfield Public Library website under the 150th anniversary. And so if you look at across the top, I hope you can see the title there. It says marshfieldlibrary.org, and then a backslash with the 150th anniversary. It takes you to the Marshfield Public Library website for the 150th. And if you look down there, there's a place where it says Marshfield Stories. The then and nows were created and put in there as a PDF, so you could look at it and you would see exactly what I had just shown you in the previous two slides, that picture of the building before and after, and then that brief history that was given to it. But then there was this idea of creating additional resources for people. And so in the case of the consumer store, for example, the first building that was there was the Michael Steinmetz store. And so there's a history of the Michael Steinmetz store in here. And he had two locations. At one time, he was located on the north side of Arnold Street, and then the building that was put up for the consumer store was built on the south side of Arnold Street. So it's pointed out on the map there. Then there's a picture of the original building as he built it. And then there's a history of how the building changed. And for Mr. Steinmetz store, there's 5 pages of things, and it talks about the original building of the store, things that were going on in the store. Theodore Steinmetz, people are probably familiar with his name. He was a well-known band instructor, conductor, World War I and II soldier or band leader. And he actually opened up on the second floor a hall where they taught music to kids. He also manufactured instruments up there. And so while it's not directly related to the store that his father was running, it was something that happened in that building. And so there's kind of a social context to it. And so we've included that kind of information in here too. And then because it was a really popular store in Marshfield, when they went out of business, we thought the ad was important for what they had, so you can see what people were purchasing at the time and things like that. And so you got a little bit of just a newspaper clipping from the store when it was going out of business. And then we wanted to include things that were directly related to the owners. And so in this case, when Mr. Steinmetz died, his obituary is here, and then when his wife passed away several years later, her obituary is here. And so what we were trying to do for each of these stores or each of these buildings was create this history that people could get to and actually get more information than we could put in the Hub City Times or any place else. And so in this case, just for that building, there was 47, 54, 57, 62 pages of information of businesses just for that one business, whether you talk about the Kessel Brothers, the Consumer Store, Johnson Hills, Macaulay's, or eventually, St. Vincent de Paul. There's a lot of history that can be generated and filed here. The library has been very helpful in making arrangements to provide this kind of space so that there's a long-standing record of these buildings as it's created. Right now, there is another site called the QR Codes of Historic Marshfield that's privately held. It's not a city function, and it's at risk of going away if the Marshfield Area Genealogy Group ever goes away. And so the idea was to get that to some place where it's permanently housed so that people in town can take advantage of it. And there's already lots of information on this site. The idea is now to start shifting it to the new site that the library is providing for a permanent record of these historical documents. And you can see these are 2 pages there. This one is on the Upham store. You have pictures of the Upham store before the fire. Then you have pictures of them rebuilding after the fire. If you look just right off to the side there, you can see a bunch of guys standing in front of the temporary building. And then there's other stories that go in there with it too. So the idea is that eventually these then and now photographs will all be assembled and put into a folder on the Marshfield's 150 page. And so Maida, first off, Jill and the adult service librarian staff have all been very supportive about making this happen. And it's a good thing for the city, I think. The other problem or project that we wanted to do is with those now and then photographs was preserve pictures of now. And so as we've been collecting photographs for the now pictures, they've been accumulating in a file, and there's 635 digital files of businesses and buildings in Marshfield that have been collected this year. And those will all be printed and then transferred to the Northwood County Historical Society. Haven't talked to the library yet about whether or not they want to get into images. So, but the part of the plan was to collect kind of a snapshot of what the pictures were supposed to, what Marshfield looks like now, so that 25, 50 years from now, people can pull up images and they'd be preserved in one spot. When we started talking about this, it was a question of whether or not it would be crowdsourced, where we just ask people to do it, or if we got a professional photographer to go out and do it. And it ends up we're doing more of the crowdsourcing type thing. And if anybody wants to help participate, there are still buildings that we have not taken pictures and documented. Then there was a contest that we stumbled across during the 1970s that ran in the Marshfield News Herald called Where Is It? And when we first started talking about this series, we thought, well, this would be a good one to duplicate. And so what became, or what was Where Is It in 1977 became Look Up Marshfield when we first started talking. And then as time changes and as we got closer to doing things, it morphed again and it became Out and About. And I know some of you are familiar with Out and About for sure. But what we did was we took a group of people that were dedicated specifically to this. They went out and took pictures of different architectural aspects of buildings or something unique about a building, and then they provided it as a clue in the newspaper and an answer later on. Now, when we first started doing this, this was one of the pictures that I used to talk about this column, Where Is It? And the clue for this one says, this sleepy looking figure is more than just another pretty face hanging around downtown. It's a triplet one of three landmarks gazing from arches above windows on a downtown street. And nobody knew exactly where it was. And somebody from Wausau called, and they were looking for some information about a building that used to be where the BMO Bank is. And when I started really looking at the pictures, there those little cherubs were located on the building. It was the old Adler Pharmacy down there. And if you looked up, they were up above the three windows. It's not a great picture that I can find, but I know that's what they were. And so everything comes around, and what we were hoping to do with this is create that kind of same enthusiasm with people looking for things. And I think a lot of people have enjoyed what became Out and About in Marshfield. So the Out and About was announced formally in the January 5th newspaper, Hub City Times. And again, the rules were pretty much the same as the last time. They would publish a clue one week, and then the next week they would share the answer. We were very fortunate to have some local businesses come forward and sponsor prizes. Marshfield Parks and Rec Department, the YMCA helped or donated to a big prize that's yet to be drawn January 3rd. And then Melody Gardens, Weber Farm Store, and McDonald's each provided coupons for either a sandwich or ice cream that we could give as prizes to the participants. There were 30 prize winners so far. I know that December's haven't been selected, so there'll be a few more. There were 54 regular participants whose name I was going to pull out of the box at the library desk from people that submitted the answers every week. And I think it's been a real success because people have talked about enjoying it. I was having a conversation one day with someone who's listening, and she had asked about where this lion was located in the city because it was one of the clues. And I can tell you where that's at. No. I want to figure it out myself. And so people were really looking for these things. They wanted to find them on their own, which I think is really cool because you do learn more about Marshfield when you search something out for yourself. The three people that I want to kind of recognize for making this a success this year were Chris Keogh, Chris Coleman, and Vicki Schnitzler. All of those people are participants or commissioners on the Marshfield Historic Preservation Commission for the city. And they took this project and ran with it. I know that the last clues are out there for the rest of this month, and on January 3rd, they will do the drawing for the final prize drawing, and then the following week it will appear in the Hub City Times as the last entry for Out and About Marshfield 150. So I think this was a cool project because people got involved and were learning things as they were having fun. Another thing we talked about when we first started this was some storytelling software that exists that we wanted to create links to. And so the one storytelling software link that was created has to do with the Governor William Upham House. There are plans to continue and follow up and finish things up that weren't done this year with this. For example, when we talked the then and now, we were going to create a walking tour with all of the then and now locations so people can actually walk from site to site and see the history for that building that has been created when we were doing the research on the then and nows. And then the Out and About Marshfield 150, the same idea is to work it out as a walking tour. I'm thinking for some of the school kids, it would be, they go to walk downtown. It would be something that the teachers could use as a teaching aid to find some of the things and then learn a little bit about the characteristic that they're seeing. And so we still have to work it out, but all the work has been done. It's now just a matter of putting the information in there and making it happen. So the storytelling software that we planned on using, the Clio.com, we got our feet wet, but there's still more to do on it. And then another part of this project this year that turned out very exciting, I thought, was Marshfield's 150, honoring heroes and leaders past and present. And when we started, the intention was to name 150 individuals this year. We are currently at 54. And it's not that we didn't have lots of nominations. There are still more nominations. There are some sitting at my house that people have asked me to either flesh out or finish up for them. And so I know we have additional nominations in the works that the library has already worked on. There are other nominations coming. But we're not going to quit just because it's the end of the year is the message that I want to say. We talked about doing 150, and so we're going to continue to accept nominations to share with people weekly in the Hub City Times. And again, when you look at this collection of pictures here, these are the people that I had suggested might be honorees in the 150th as we were getting started. And looking at the top line, Dr. Dagey and William Upham have been nominated and named. No one from the second line, Chief John Young, Willard Purdy, Fred Beal, or Betty Adler have been nominated yet. And yet they're all deserving to be recognized. And then in the bottom, Mother Frances Streidel and Marilyn Hardiker have been nominated, but Theodore Steinmetz and Father Eisen haven't. I know there's a nomination in the works for Father Eisen, and I expect that there are other nominations that are still in the work for people, that have said they want to nominate somebody. And then there's people like Fred Beal and Willard Purdy that we just need to encourage some people to do that. The Northwood County Historical Society has submitted a couple of nominations. There are people that they know should be nominated, and that will happen yet too. So I expect this will go through all of 2023 and then probably finish up sometime in 2024 when we reach 150 individuals. But the important message is, really that you can still submit a nomination just by going to the Marshfield Public Library, marshfield-library.org/Marshfield-150th-anniversary and submit a nomination yourself. If you are looking to see who the winners are or who were named the honorees already, there's 3 different sources where you can look at it. I mentioned the Marshfield Public Library website that has a page on the navigation bar for the 150th. Everyone that has been named to this list already has a story posted on that page. And so in this case, Governor Upham was the first person named. You can scroll down, find William Upham and select his name. And the story would come up looking like that. It's a 2-page story, picture, and then all the details that also appeared in the Hub City Times. But it's a permanent place for that record where if you're looking for it, you can go to the Marshfield Public Library website anytime, click on it, and read those stories. After they're named in the Hub City Times, they are also posted to a Facebook page called Marshfield's 150 Heroes and Leaders Past and Present. And what we've been doing is each week we try to post the story that was announced or the individual that was announced that week. Now, November is a busy month for me, and so I was behind, and we ended up posting 3 of them all at the same time. But we generally try to get the story out 1 a week. And what's nice about it is once it gets there, people can actually get to it quite easily. And then we share it with our Marshfield and Northwood County history page. That has 4,500 followers. And so once it gets posted there, people see it, and there's lots and lots of comments that were made. And I think sometimes the stories are great, but the comments and the additional commentary that people make in general in the public are even better, to get that kind of feedback on the people that have been named to this register or to this list. And some of the names, when I think about it, I think about unlikely heroes. They're not the names of people that I would have thought about, but when you read their stories, they are so cool. And there are heroes walking around Marshfield all over the place that don't get the recognition they deserve. And so this is still a nice way of paying tribute to some of those people. So if there's someone that in your life or in the lives of anyone in the community that you think should be recognized, it's a simple process. You can have up to 1,500 words, and then there's like 10 questions. Your name and address. Do you have a picture? Is the person living or deceased? And then the explanation about why they should be nominated. Shelby.
She was a bus driver for years and years, and I knew her from, she's actually, her and I danced together, but anyway, she done so much driving that bus and helping these people onto the bus, these children that could hardly walk and so on and so forth. So I was really intrigued. I thought that was a wonderful nomination.
I think that all the nominations have merit, and I agree with you. There's people out there that do many good things that don't get recognized, and so it's nice to do that. So again, if people have someone they want to nominate, I encourage them to do it. If they have questions on how to do it or are afraid they can't do it for one reason or another, you can always reach out to the library, but I hate to burden the people at the library too much. You could reach out to the Northwood County Historical Society or to myself, and we will do what we can to help you. So, and then again, I wanted to put a special thanks. I mentioned the library a couple times. Unless an organization like the library would have said, we can do this, it wouldn't have happened. So everyone from the Marshfield Public Library who's been involved with Marshfield's 150 deserves a round of applause. And they have my deepest appreciation, but it was an important contribution to this year's events that came from the library. And then we can't forget about Chris Leonard and Mike Warren from the Hub City Times, who are publishing these every week. And I know they're balancing the copy they need to put in and the paid advertisements and still fitting this in where and when they can. And so thank you to the library, thank you to Hub City Times for this. And I do think this was a worthwhile project, and people seem to thoroughly enjoy. I can't tell you how often I hear that I can't wait for the next one to come out. So. And then the News Herald negatives. When we first started talking about the News Herald negatives, and I think everybody knows, but just to bring everybody up to speed, sometime in the 1990s, the Marshfield News Herald gave their collection of old newspaper negatives, or old negatives from their newspaper images, to the Northwood County Historical Society. And then years later, the other part of them, the more current ones, were given to the Historic Preservation Association. So both sets of negatives exist that for the early newspapers into the early 2000s. And what we have been doing is we went through and estimated, and I think the estimate might have been a little high, but I went through and counted the number of boxes. I counted all the negatives inside one box and then extrapolated what I thought the total was. It ended up being like 330,000 negatives were in there. And I thought, oh, yeah, we can do this. And we've been working on it for a year, and I would say we've got between 10 and 15,000 negatives scanned. And that sounds like a lot, and someone should say, how come you haven't been sharing them? And well, there are so many steps to this, because once we scan the negative, then we have to match it to the newspaper so we can get the caption that goes with it, that we can get the identification of the people that are in the picture before we can share it. And then, because as soon as you share something, people are going to say, can I get a copy of that? You have to be able to go back and find it. So before we share the pictures, we find the caption, I write down what we can about it, and then identify it before it gets shared. And we've been sharing them on our Facebook page, but the big project here is to get them scanned. And so we've been focusing on scanning those images. And they have multiple uses besides just appearing on Facebook. This is what a Facebook entry looks like. And this one was done, I'm not sure what that date it was. It was sometime, I think that was in March or June or something. But what we did was we went through and we scanned a bunch of pictures, and then we selected 17 of them or 18 of them and matched the captions after we found them, and then put them out so people could actually see them. And we've done this 5 or 6 times, but I'll tell you that it takes 4 or 5 hours to get the negatives ready to share. And we're trying to scan, and sometimes it's, do I scan more pictures or do I share these? And so every so often when time is available, we tried sharing them, but we're trying to work on another project here that we want to use these negatives for. And so we've been kind of not sharing them as much as we'd like to. Negatives are scanned every Wednesday and Saturday at the Northwood County Historical Society, starting at 10 o'clock. We have a good set of volunteers, people that are willing to come in and put in time scanning negatives, matching the negatives to the story and things like that. Kibby Arculari, Sue Cult, Chris Porter's kids, Tim Kraus, Ryan Knack, Kim Krieger, myself, and I'm probably forgetting somebody. And as I was typing this afternoon, I thought, oh, shucks, as soon as I start mentioning names, I'm going to miss somebody because I've done it before. I figured that was okay. But between that group of people, we're getting a lot of these images scanned. And the intent is to share them, whether it's on the Marshfield Northwood County Historical Society Facebook page or with the Marshfield Memories book that's coming out. And I was going to put in a mock-up, the mock-up that was shared with me from Chris. I didn't get to it today. But we are to the point with this book about, we have a mock-up of some of the pages. We have images there. We have added captions. And what the intention is we are going to publish sometime early this year a book called Marshfield Memories, and it's going to deal with the 1940s to the year 2000. It's going to cover this time frame. And there are some pictures that will just absolutely floor you. Marshfield had a hula hoop contest for Mad Market Days. And so you've got Reese Field over on Oak Street with 200 kids in it hula hooping. You've got pictures of the inside of the warming house on the pickle pond, or it was either the pickle pond or the pond on Oak Avenue. As soon as you open up the picture and look at it, you can smell the sweaty woolly mittens sitting on the radiators and the oil burning and the oil. They're just fantastic pictures. And so the intention is to get that book done first thing next year, and have it available for people to purchase. And that's going to be important because it's a fundraiser for the Northwood County Historical Society. And everybody probably knows that the budget was cut this year for things, and it's going to be one way that the Historical Society can make up some of those funds that we need to run the building or to take care of the building. But it's going to be a good book because unlike the first Marshfield Memories, or even some of the photos that were in the Marshfield story, volume 1 or volume 2, these are going to be pictures that people recognize and remember, which makes them cooler. So that's coming. And it was supposed to get done before Christmas. Well, it didn't, but there's only so many hours in the day. We are to the point, though, where the News Herald has given us permission to use the pictures as long as we give them credit. And so while I'm thanking people as we're going through this, we're going to owe a big debt to the News Herald for allowing us to use those in the book. But even looking at the history that those pictures captured and document, we owe a big thank you if they don't get put in a book, because there's so many cool things that went on in Marshfield that the Marshfield News Herald documented for us on a daily basis. And then they gave them to the historical societies without asking for anything for them. You know, that's a big donation and an important piece of Marshfield history that's preserved. Darn right. You know, they could have been thrown out so easy, and there are pictures there that are just absolutely priceless. There's one that's just driving me crazy. I mentioned that all of the negatives were sorted by envelopes and dates, but not all of them. The large 4x5 negatives that were taken in the 1940s and 50s and early 1960s were all put into boxes without identification. And there's some great pictures in there, and it takes a little while to figure out what you're looking for. It's going through newspapers page by page, trying to match them up. But there was one picture that is it's a thorn in my side yet. It's a picture of two kids on a bicycle taken behind Columbia Park. They're dressed kind of in clown clothes. And the bicycle has, I can pedal all I want, but I can never catch up or something on it. But it's just a really cool picture. Would like to know what it's for, and we haven't found it yet. So as we started planning activities for this year, we had talked about piggybacking on other events. And June Dairy Fest was one of the big ones that we wanted to piggyback on, because that's the big event for the city, and it was important to recognize the city's 150th anniversary as you're celebrating regular activities. So one of the ways that we were lucky to be able to do this year was to actually bring Governor Upham's granddaughter, Monty Upham, here, and she was made the parade marshal for the Dairy Fest parade. And thrilled to death. She said, I can't believe how it felt when I turned the corner off of 2nd Street and started heading down Central and saw all those people waving. And everybody was excited, and it was a great event, and she had a great experience. We were very fortunate this year to have the Upham family visit Marshfield and Northwood County Historical Society, not once, but 3 times. Different members of the family came and visited the Upham home. But Monty Upham, that was one of her highlights, she said, for being able to be parade marshal that day. The other thing we did for Dairy Fest was the Northwood County Historical Society shared the expenses with Farm Technology Days to sponsor the 10-hitch Meyer farm, the horses, the 10-horse hitch that the Myers family put into the parade this year. It's been a few years since horses were in the parade. We've had people talk to us about this in the past. We were hoping to get more people to participate in it, but we only had the one. But it was nice to see horses in the parade, because a standard feature of most parades in Marshfield's past were to have horses in them. And this was a very cool setup to see that 10-horse team head down Central Avenue. And again, the Northwood County Historical Society and Farm Technology Days sponsored it. The sponsorship for the Northwood County Historical Society was actually sponsored by Rem's Funeral Home for us. And so I want to give a shout out of thanks to them also. And then the other event that happened during June Dairy Fest was something called the Marshfield Memorabilia Show. And we did this in connection with the Chestnut Center for the Arts. And what we did, and I shouldn't say we, because I was just a bystander in this, Ken Bargander, Chris Coleman, Lynette Pupp actually assembled or requested people to bring things. Shelby, you brought a collection of little red glasses and things like that. But in the end, we had enough pieces of Marshfield memorabilia to fill the little fireside room in the Chestnut Center. And people enjoyed it. There were people in and out of there all day long with Dairy Fest. And we wanted to also make available to people who don't go to the Central Wisconsin State Fair some of those fair boards that get used every so often. So if you look at the pictures here, you've got the memorabilia exhibit that was in the fireside room, and then the area that was behind the performance hall in the Chestnut Center was set up with all of the, no, not all of them, but some of the history boards that get shared at the Central Wisconsin State Fair. So I mentioned Ken and Chris. They were really the big movers and shakers for putting these together. But Lynette Pupp, Stephen Mary Schifferl, and Marilyn Eckhart all helped by watching the setup there to make sure people were coming in and answering questions and things like that. And again, there were some costs related to this. And we have Randy and Tom Gershman Edward R. Jones to thank, and also the Jacken family and Rem's Funeral Home for helping offset the costs that might have been involved with that. And then June Dairy Fest activities are always a big deal at the Northwood County Historical Society. And this year, besides just June Dairy Fest, which we had a great Dairy Fest, great annual pie and ice cream social, lots of people coming to the event. We had live music. Joe Finnemore and Jill Kupfer were singing for us. Besides that, we had the Stitches in Time exhibit, and that was actually set up starting at Christmas of last year, and it went all of this year, and it just came down a couple months ago now. But it was actually looking at Marshfield in clothing and hats. And the State Historical Society even came up to look at our hat collection because they were impressed by the number of hats that the Northwood County Historical Society has. It was amazing. When we were setting up, we had announced that the hats would be set up by April 9th or something to that effect. We didn't have a firm date, but people were calling the week before to find out if the hat display was ready for them to come in. I didn't realize hats were such a big thing, but they are. And it was kind of fun because in addition to the hats that we had set up as examples of different types of hats, there were some hats that were duplicates.
Closing in 20 minutes.
Boy, he's right on the nose, 20 minutes.
Please gather your things and exit the room. If you have materials you would like to borrow, please check them out now. The library will be closing in 20 minutes. Thank you.
That's the Upham family.
Right, and that's the Upham family on there. When it comes to the events, one of the things that was really great for the people at the Northwood County Historical Society was to have the Upham family come through and tour the house, look at pictures, talk stories about their grandparents. They wouldn't have known William. They would have known Grace, his second wife. But it was great to have them come through and spend time in the house. And in this picture here, this is Fritz's family, and Fritz's family make up the majority of them. Then Monty and her grandnephews are on the left-hand side on the top step, and Monty's in the kind of the pinkish magenta colored blouse. But both of Mr. Upham's boys, his kids or grandkids, were there for the celebrations this year because they wanted to be part of it also. And I think that's just a nice touch to have the family involved with Marshfield yet. The Pie and Ice Cream Social is always the fundraiser for the year. Yeah, and the fundraiser won't happen until next May, but everyone is always invited to the Pie and Ice Cream Social during Dairy Fest. Yes, 77. All right, and then we also wanted to celebrate the Marshfield and the anniversary of the Marshfield fire. It wasn't the 150th, but it was the 135th anniversary of the Marshfield fire. And so this year we dusted off the commemorative fire walk. We solicited people to come in and portray different people. This is just part of the cast. If you look at the picture, we had the youngest person to perform was Vincent Dalkey. He portrayed Adolf Lebel. Then we had Mrs. Furstenberg, portrayed by Kristen Hughes. John Berg portrayed his great-grandfather. Tom Patak portrayed Governor Upham. Dave LaFontaine is up there. He was Mr. Upham's engineer. And then Otto Scharman is being portrayed by John Armbruster there. And there's a couple other people I'll point out in the other pictures. But what we did was we did these tours three times on the anniversary date. We started the first one at 11:49, so it would actually be the anniversary of the time when the fire started, and then we gave two other performances, the afternoon and the early evening, and it was really well attended, and again, lots of positive feedback about it, because we tend to not realize what all happened, but by telling the stories in first person narrative, people get the full idea of what people went through during the fire. And even sitting here now thinking about it, I can't imagine, you know, being a parent or being a husband and not knowing where my wife or my children are, and all this smoke and explosions and ashes falling from the sky. It's just unfathomable almost to imagine what those people really went through that day. But no one died, and it was a great event for us during the fire, during the anniversary. And you can see we gave them midday. The weather was great, and we didn't have huge crowds. I would say there were between 20 and 30 people, 30 probably the most at one time, but people had a chance to hear the stories or firsthand accounts of different people. I didn't mention Teresa Bonnick, and she's sitting here. She performed with a broken foot. so she was sitting, but I mean, the dedication of these people that came out and helped us portray this is really greatly appreciated. So there was a lot more that we planned on doing. You know, we had gone through and we kind of had a brainstorming session and talked about all the possibilities. There are things that didn't happen. And some of them I can explain, and some of them I can't explain yet. There was supposed to be a Monopoly game. It was shipped from China. We don't know what happened to it. So the Monopoly game never came to fruition. There is a book out there that was a pop-up book that was actually worked on by the Marshfield Library. There is a story written, and the graphics or the illustrations, I think, were finally done, but then it was done really too late to finish up. So eventually there'll be a pop-up story that's it's a great story. It's like Little Engine That Could, only talking about Marshfield, in Marshfield story. And so that may come out another year, but it didn't happen this year as it was originally planned. And then we talked about things like restaurant events and a time capsule, other things that could have happened that just didn't. And at first I thought I needed to apologize for not getting some of those things done, but we really don't, because what we did what we could do, and we did the best that we could do. Yeah. And I think we did okay. So one of the things I want to do before quitting and kind of putting a plug in for the 250th anniversary is that it wasn't one organization and it wasn't one individual. It was a conglomeration of a bunch of organizations and a bunch of people willing to share time and talent. And so the Historic Preservation Association, the museum and it's one of the community center, that group participated. Members from the Marshfield Area Genealogy Group, Main Street Marshfield, City of Marshfield Historic Preservation Commission, that should say, not committee, Chestnut Center for the Arts, the Everett Rail Marshfield Public Library, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Visitors and Promotion Bureau, the Hub City Times. I can't thank the Hub City Times enough for what they did this year. And then people that just came forward and shared things for the memorabilia show or for stories that tied or could suggest things that we did. Lots of people got involved to make things happen. Now, in 2026, as Natalie suggested, is the United States semi-quincentennial, which is the 250th anniversary of the formation of the United States. And people are already planning, and I have a little planning guide that's put out by the State Historical Society and the Historic Preservation Association, the National Historic Preservation Association, that we can start thinking about. And tonight, just for this is how much time we have, this is a plug or an invitation that if you want to get involved and if you want to make something happen, the only way you're going to make what you want to see happen is for you to get involved and do it. So this is an invitation for everybody who has an interest in seeing something happen a certain way. It's an invitation for you to participate. And right now, you know, we're finishing this year. Christmas has got to get over. The holidays have got to get over. But in 2024, 2023, we should start thinking about what we want to accomplish for 2026. And I invite everyone to participate. So with that, I think I've reached the end of my slides. So if any questions?
When the Rippers arrived, where did he build his hotel?
You know where Founder Square is?
Yes.
That's actually, there's a little sign on Chestnut, well, between Chestnut and across from the parking lot for Casa Amigos is where he built the hotel. So that's, yeah, that's the place that he built it. And then he also owned land north, out by where Walmart is, the old Nikolai Dairy Farm. He had land out there. So. Any questions from the audience? I don't think so.
Thank you, Don.
Oh, glad to do it. Oh, and my wife is, because I didn't get this included in there. This is a shameless plug, but Christmas is coming, and the Northwood County, excuse me, the Senior Craft Shop had 2 projects this year that they did to help with the 150th anniversary. One of them is this, and I hope you can all see this, is this neat little bank that was done. It was done by a local artisan, and it's got the logo on it for the Marshfield 150. You can pick them up at the Senior Craft Shop, and if you wanted to give a son or granddaughter, or a son, grandson, daughter, granddaughter, a nice present to commemorate the 150th anniversary, you can get it at the Senior Craft Shop. And then the other project that they had was a compilation of recipes from the Marshfield, or from the Wood County senior citizens. It was done in the 1970s, and they reprinted it. So you've got recipes in here for casseroles, cookies, cakes, desserts, but they're names that you would recognize. I was surprised when I went through it. My grandmother's got recipes in there. Great aunt's got recipes in there. Yeah, so they reprinted it as a fundraiser this year, and those are also available at the Senior Craft Shop. All right. Are we okay?
We're good.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Oops, there's a. Any idea why the chat was disabled? Barb, I don't know why the chat was disabled. Good help is hard to find. We'll fix it the next time.
Up here. I just want to thank Don. I think the whole city of Marshfield owes you some thanks, honestly, for a long time. You do so much for the community, and we're all so grateful for that. And for speaking is, sometimes more than a few months in a row sometimes, and we always glean so much information from you, so we're very appreciative. So sorry there was so many technical issues tonight. We're hoping to get all those taken care of by the next time. We'll be doing another spoken history in January, and if you come by the library next Thursday, we're also doing a holiday reflections kind of informal gathering by the fireplace. Have some cider, just kind of take a break from the hustle and bustle. So everyone have a good night tonight, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Kim.
See ya.
Have a nice Christmas ahead on.
I'll do that.
All right.